Hey guys, this is Thomas over here, nursemoneytalk.com. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about what I think is the best shift for a new nurse to start in. But before I get into that, if you're not already subscribed, I want to go ahead and invite you to hit that subscribe button. On this channel, I talk about all things related to nursing student, and of course, nurse life. So let's go ahead and get started. So before I get into my answer, I'm going to take a step back and actually tell you a story about what happened to me when it came to picking out my first shift to start in whenever I first became a nurse, because that will actually end up setting up what my answer is. So here's what happened. Whenever I first started as a nurse, I was going into a specialty department, and I assumed that, in most situations, that as a new nurse, I was going to start working on the night shift. So for those of you guys that don't know, typically new nurses, they generally start on night shift because in most facilities, most departments, there is a long wait list because most people would rather work on days than nights. And so a lot of departments, they'll put the new nurses on nights because you're new, you don't have seniority. And then over time, then as the spots free up on days, then people can then roll from nights 2 days, typically on based on a seniority. A lot of the facilities or departments that I know of, it could be a couple years wait before you could actually end up being able to roll from nights 2 days. I kind of want to set that up because the department I was going into as a new nurse actually had, oddly enough, the reverse issue. So they actually had more people who were on nights. So their night crew actually wanted to stay on nights. So they actually needed help on days, not nights. Even as a new nurse, I knew that was a little bit of a peculiar thing because that's a little bit unusual for the typical department. And so I'm talking to some of the nurses on there, and come to find out that for whatever reason, that department just happened to hire a lot of nurses who happened to work on nights that really wanted that shift differential. And so they really wanted that shift differential. And I remember I was talking to one guy, and he told me that that shift differential was pretty much enough to just about cover his truck payment, if I remember correctly, which I think at that point was about, I think he was making an extra $500 or so, give or take, a month just on the night shift differential. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is awesome. I don't have to work on nights. I can go straight to days. And so I'm kind of feeling pretty good. So I go in there, talk to the manager, and the manager pretty much refuses to put me on days. They want all new nurses to start on nights. The reason that I got, which I pushed back a little bit on this, but I know full well, especially going into a specialty department as a new nurse, I don't have a whole lot of leverage. So if they want me to start on nights, I'm gonna start on nights. But the reason I was told was that nights is slower and it would give a new nurse more opportunity to just kind of get acclimated to being a new nurse, just because you could more easily think through what's going on. And so I'm thinking, well, I mean, I like I said, didn't have any other choice, so had to go and work nights. And for some of you guys, because just to kind of add this part in there before I get into what you guys can probably tell is me being frustrated at what happened. I put in my dues working on nights. I worked on nights for several years, even after that, probably 4 or 5 years, I think, before going on days. So I put in my dues working on nights. And I just have to say that if that manager was trying to do favors for the new nurses, and I might have, maybe I was the exception, but I remember feeling very frustrated. Until this day, whenever I think about it, I actually feel pretty frustrated about it because my general thinking even after so many years of being a nurse is that the best shift for a new nurse to start in. This could be 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7, or 7A to 7P, or 7P to 7A, is the shift that best works with that new nurse. And this could be for either because of a scheduling issue or because of you just not being able to handle a certain shift. Some people aren't morning people, so they would much rather take maybe an evening shift or a night shift, or maybe it's like a scheduling, maybe it's a school thing, maybe it's because you can't sleep during the day, and so you working days just would work a lot better from you from a mental health and from a physical health perspective. Because here's the deal, that ended up being part of my issue because working on nights, I couldn't sleep during the day. Like I would try to do my 3 on, work 3 days in a row, 4 off or whatever. I would try to flip during my days off, and like I would end up losing. It was almost like I would lose a day trying to flip and then lose another day trying to like flip back. I was trying to do it because I couldn't sleep because some people might say like, oh, well, you should have just stayed on nights during the whole time. I couldn't sleep during the day. And so it was working on nights for me was some of the hardest time of my nursing career. And to be clear, I understand maybe like the reason why some managers or some nurses might think that the night shift is the better shift for a new nurse because things tend to be slower. You have no admin, no doctors doing rounds, no like patients typically aren't going through procedures and whatnot. And so there is time to kind of think through more of what you're doing. Now, of course, this is without getting into like the disease process doesn't take a break, and sometimes hospitals will kind of staff things on a skeleton crew, so if things go wrong you have no support like you do on day shift. I'm just kind of airing this out because I can understand that frustration because I've been there, but that could be a separate video. But as a whole, I think it's reasonable to say things can definitely be slower than it on nights than it can be on days. The issue with that is that if you are having issues sleeping, then it doesn't matter how slow things are. You're just struggling. And I was on the struggle bus on nights throughout the however many years I was doing it. I was on the struggle bus. And so I truly believe I would have been better going on days, even if it was that much harder. I would have been better going on days, struggling through that, as opposed to going on nights and then struggling as well. Because to me, if it's on days and I'm struggling at work, then at least that is just me struggling at work. That I'm struggling at work, and then when I go home, that's that. But now when I was made to go on nights, when there was an opportunity to go on days, because if I remember correctly, they even had to get some of the people who were on nights to roll over to days just because there was just a lot of people uh, who were on nights. And so there was clearly an opportunity for me to go on days. And so I think that, like I said, and if there's a manager looking at this and you disagree, let me know in the comment sections below. But for me, from my experience, and if you have an opportunity for this as well, and you're listening to this as a new nurse and you have that option, I would highly encourage you to pick the one that best fits your schedule and best fits your ability to actually function on a regular basis. Because, and don't get me wrong, like you obviously need people who work on nights, and I'm glad that there are nurses who like working on nights. And if you are the type of person who you can make nights work for you, then by all means, go right ahead. And obviously, if you don't have an option for it, then you're gonna have to work on nights anyway.